Well, here's the no bullshit news that no one is telling you. And that is, as a musician, I would say that a very large amount of your chance of success depends on the year that you were born. Someone I read once in a book said that for the music lover, not the musician, but for the music lover that was born in 1950 hit the jackpot. It meant that they were 17 in the summer of love, 1967. They were in their 20s in the 70s when gigs were plenty and all that kind of stuff. So I was thinking about this, and when I grew up, for some reason, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I always was playing and I was always working with people that were older than me, anywhere from 10 to 20 years older than me. It's like I was kind of plucked from an earlier generation to work with these guys. Now, in the Toronto scene, the older guys were the Boss Brass guys, the Guido Bassos, the Rob McConnells, the Jimmy Dales, the Mickey Irbies, all of those guys. If you're lucky enough to be born into an era where things stabilize, so if you think of all those musicians that were born in the 30s and the 40s, they came to be professionals in the 50s and in the 60s. And what happened was all the technology that was in place basically stayed the same until the CD came along in the early 80s. So it was vinyl. Now that was a very different world when there was vinyl. And what it meant was that it gave the Musicians Union and Congress and all those people lots of time to catch up with the technology, which meant payments were legalized. So you would get mechanical rights on records. You would get certain royalty rate on terrestrial radio. That's all there was. They didn't call it terrestrial radio back then. They just called it radio because that's all there was. So when I look at my friends, lots of those guys that have passed away in the last while, the Guido Bassos and the Gina Maros and the Jimmy Dales and all those guys, they were born in the 30s. They became professional musicians in the 50s. And a lot of them retired in the 90s or 2000-ish. Now, Napster didn't come along till 2001, something like that, when the rules started to be rewritten. Even when CDs came along, I mean, I don't know if many of you younger guys realize it, but when CDs came along, it was a cash cow for the record industry. Because all of a sudden, everyone was rebuying their vinyl collections on CD because of the superior quality and all that kind of stuff. And not only that, the biggest hoax that was pulled on the public back then was that these CDs were technological marvels. And we used to see pictures of people in lab coats and like almost hazmat suits making the CDs. And so you went from buying a record for $7, like a vinyl record for $7, to sometimes as high as $24.99 for a CD. So this meant the late 80s and the 90s were just a cash cow for the majors. Everybody was making money. When I was a session player in the 80s, there was just more money around than they knew what to do with. I had a full-time cartage guy that just carted my racks of synthesizers from studio to studio. And everybody knew that if you hired me, it was plus $120 just for my cartage guy. And nobody blinked because there was a ton of money. So I'm going to take, for example, a good friend of mine, like I said, who has passed away, Guido Basso. So Guido Basso was born in the 30s. He was born in 1938, 20 years older than me exactly. And he lived in an era of gigs and money. This was in the era where sidemen in Toronto used to live in Rosedale. For those of you who aren't from Toronto, Rosedale is a very expensive part of Toronto. Sidemen that were in the Boss Brass would be living in Rosedale. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. They were lucky enough to just hit it right on the money as far as when to be born. So he was probably a professional musician. He was 38. So let's say 56. He started to play professionally, 57. Started in Montreal, moved to Toronto, became a fixture in the studio scene. These guys would just walk back and forth between studios, doing sessions all day. Then at night, they'd go play a jazz gig. Plus, they were world famous because of the Boss Brass. So Guido turns 60 in, 38 is 98, 2003, 65. He's 65 in 2003. He calls it quits. And he still plays a little bit, but basically that's when everything started to change, and that's when Napster begat the streaming age. So for all you guys born in 2006 out there, you're being born into a time when they say that the technological advances that will happen in the next 20 years will be more than the technological advances that have happened since the beginning of time until now. In the old days, I always felt that in my career, I had to reinvent myself every 10 years because things change. So I was a player for 10 years. Then I became a session guy on synths for 10 years. Then I started to write some jingles for 10 years. And then I wrote film and television for 15 years. And I felt that because a musician is basically a self-employed entrepreneur, you have to reinvent yourself to stay current and to stay viable in the music industry if you want to stay in it. That brings us up to now. CDs, Napster, streaming, now AI is here. Here's the deal. SUNO is not going away. AI is not going away. It's here. It's already changing all our lives. And like I said in my Eddie Schwartz interview, you can't be NIMBY about this. You can't be not in my backyard about this. You can't say, well, I love AI. I love it for medical. I'm asking it 30 questions a day on my phone, and it's fantastic, and I love it. Or when I'm working on my DAW and I don't know how to do a function, I ask AI in 5 seconds. No more owner's manuals. You just ask ChatGPT, Google AI, Gemini, whatever it is that you're using. And you've got the answer in 5 seconds. No scrolling through an owner's manual. So I love all of that. But don't touch my little compositions. Don't touch my little pop songs. It's like, no, I'm sorry. AI is here and it's a blanket thing. And in a future video, I'm going to talk about how I really feel that all of this is leading to society being completely changed over. We're headed for universal basic income way before we thought it was going to happen because there's just not going to be anywhere near enough jobs. So that's a topic for a different day. But okay, so SUNO's here. So as you've seen in my past videos, I was kind of blown away when SUNO first came on. I was kind of like, oh my God, I wanted to quit. Then I recorded a couple of things, piano and voice. I fed it into SUNO. It did kind of a nice arrangement for me. Then I split the stems, put them into my DAW, start replacing. Replace, replace, replace. Vocals, first thing, replaced. Bass, replaced. Keyboards, replaced. The thing that I really think SUNO is really good for is drums. It's like better than I can program. Boom, 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 boom. It's just better. So I've been keeping the drums. Now I've already released one signal, which is called Another Life by Robin Black. Please listen to it. And on that, I kept the drums and a couple of pads. I replaced everything else. But that was my song. I wrote it on the piano. I sang it, the lyrics, everything. But I'm about to do a live gig. I've got a jazz quartet, a jazzy soul jazz quartet. And I'm doing a gig in Toronto. And I'm using some new musicians on the gig and all that stuff. And I thought I'd like to do a couple of funky things. I'd kind of like to do a funky version of Living for the City. And I'd kind of like to do a funky version of Summertime. So I just go to my DAW and I just record a piano track. That's all I did. I fed in like... So I just did that. I thought, okay, let's feed it into SUNO and just see if it can do an instrumental demo. And so I did it, and it turned out great, and it's just what I wanted. And so what I'm going to use that for is I'm just using that to send to the drummer and the bass player, because it's a trio. I sent it to my drummer and my bass player, and I said, this is the kind of thing that we're going to do, because there's no rehearsal. We just go in and play. And then I wanted to do a version of Livin' for the City by Stevie Wonder. So, you know. Like so. So I fed it in, and it came back with nice little demos. So now I feel confident that when I go to the gig, these guys have heard this. They know exactly what I'm talking about. So those will never be released. I think SUNO is fantastic for exploring grooves and for exploring feels, and for using internally, not for public consumption. I've got this new tune that is more AI than my last tune, even though I've replaced the vocals, I've replaced the keyboards, and I'm going to replace the bass. Still, the arrangement is very AI, and I'm torn. I don't know whether I'm going to release this thing or not. Now, this is after I've worked on the thing for 20 hours. Because there's one thing I got to tell you, and I tell the people that I work for, it's like, don't think that I'm going to charge you less if we use SUNO as a production tool when I'm producing a song for you. Because to tell you the truth, when I start the arrangement with SUNO and then replace everything, cut and paste, and I don't like that bar, and I have to go into Melodyne and change some notes of the chords because it always gets chords wrong, especially my chords, which are fairly intricate. I don't write songs that are A minor, F, C, G. That's a topic for another video. Because when I start a production on a song, starting with SUNO for like arrangement options and all that stuff, it's going to actually take me more time to produce that song that started with SUNO. If I'm producing a song that just starts with me, you know, a MIDI arrangement, and then we replace stuff, because I know intricately what every part is because I did it, I can move a heck of a lot faster. But with SUNO, there's a discovery period where you have to discover exactly what SUNO's doing, and then there's a lot that you aren't going to like about what SUNO did, even if you do like some of it. There's a lot you're not going to like, and it takes forever to actually fix it. The way that I'm leaning is to use SUNO for ideas, for demos, but my feeling is that moving forward, I don't think I'm going to release anything to the public with AI elements in it. I don't feel good about it. And unless something changes, I probably won't do that. I like to think of SUNO as a really good session player who doesn't listen and does whatever he wants. And every time he does a take, he does something completely different. Now, in all my years as a producer and a session player, it's like, you get a guy in, or you're the guy. You get a guy in, he plays, and you go, okay, that's good. Now, I like the first part. Okay, now can you play it a little bit more like this and a little less of that? And a good session player will give you that. Then there's the bad session players who are just kind of stream of consciousness dudes, which we have a few here in town. And you just let them go, waiting for magic moments. And then as a producer, you pull those magic moments. Takes a long time, takes a lot of comping, takes a lot of listening, takes multiple takes, all that kind of stuff. But SUNO is that session player who doesn't listen to you and does whatever he wants. If SUNO ever gets to the point where I can give it a prompt like, okay, let's try it again. So keep that track exactly the same, but change this and make sure you don't miss that A minor 9 chord there because you missed it last time, and catch those shots in bar 14. SUNO is nowhere near that. Now, it may get there, and if it does, well, we'll have to deal with that then. I can say that I'm glad that I'm in the later stages of my career than the younger stages of my career, because I really don't know how that would work out. My last comment is I just realized from watching a podcast something I'd never thought of before, and that is that it turns out that SUNO was not trained on wave files, on full frequency wave files. SUNO and all AI music have been trained on MP3s. Now, MP3s being a compressed format and not a full frequency format and a full data, there's, data bits missing everywhere in an MP3. Because let's face it, most MP3s on Spotify are 44/16s, right? Done at 128, probably. So I feel that is always going to be sonically a detriment to AI music, the fact that it was not trained on full frequency wave files. We're going to have to wait to see how that turns out. Anyway, there's lots more to talk about regarding SUNO. So stay tuned, and thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk a lot more.